Hello, boys and girls. This is David Browning. This is your Sunday reading. This is part 3 of the Ballad of Reading Gaol by Oscar Wilde. In debtor's yard the stones are hard, and the dripping wall is high, so it was there he took the air, beneath the leaden sky, and by each side a warder walked, for fear the man might die. Or else he sat with those who watched his anguish night and day, who watched him when he rose to weep, and when he crouched to pray, who watched him lest himself should rob the scaffold of its prey. The governor was strong upon the Regulations Act. The doctor said that death was but a scientific fact, and twice a day the chaplain called and left a little tract. And twice a day he smoked his pipe and drank his quart of beer. His soul was resolute and held no hiding place for fear. He often said that he was glad the hangman's hands were near. But why he said so strange a thing no warder dared to ask, for he to whom a watcher's doom is given as his task must set a lock upon his lips and make his face a mask. Or else he might be moved and try to comfort or console, and what should human pity do, pent up in murderer's hole? What word of grace in such a place could help a brother's soul? With slouch and swing around the ring we trod the fool's parade. We did not care. We knew we were the devil's own brigade, and shaven head and feet of lead make a merry masquerade. We tore the tarry rope to shreds with blunt and bleeding nails. We rubbed the doors, we scrubbed the floors, and cleaned the shining rails. And rank by rank we soaped the plank, and clattered with the pails. We sewed the sacks, we broke the stones, we turned the dusty drill, we banged the tins, and bawled the hymns, and sweated on the mill. But in the heart of every man, terror was lying still. So still it lay that every day crawled like a weed-clogged wave, and we forgot the bitter lot that waits for fool and knave, till once, as we tramped in from work, we passed an open grave. With yawning mouth the yellow hole gaped for a living thing. The very mud cried out for blood to the thirsty asphalt ring, and we knew that ere one dawn grew fair, some prisoner had to swing. Right in we went, with soul intent on death and dread and doom. The hangman with his little bag went shuffling through the gloom, and each man trembled as he crept into his numbered tomb. That night the empty corridors were full of forms of fear, and up and down the iron town stole feet we could not hear, and through the bars that hide the stars white faces seemed to peer. He lay as one who lies and dreams in a pleasant meadowland. The watchers watched him as he slept and could not understand how one could sleep so sweet a sleep with a hangman close at hand. But there is no sleep when men must weep who never yet have wept. So we, the fool, the fraud, the knave, that endless vigil kept. And through each brain, on hands of pain, another's terror crept. Alas, it is a fearful thing to feel another's guilt, for right within the sword of sin pierced to its poisoned hilt. And as molten lead were the tears we shed for the blood we had not spilt. The warders with their shoes of felt crept by each padlocked door, and peeped and saw with eyes of awe gray figures on the floor, and wondered why men knelt to pray who never prayed before. And through the night we knelt and prayed, mad mourners of a course. The troubled plumes of a midnight were the plumes upon a hearse, and bitter wine upon a sponge was the savour of remorse. The grey cock crew, the red cock crew, but never came the day, and crooked shapes of terror crouched in the corners where we lay, and each evil sprite that walks by night before us seemed to play. They glided past, they glided fast, like travellers through a mist. They mocked the moon in a rigadoon of delicate turn and twist, and with formal paste and loathsome grace the phantom kept their tryst. With mop and mow we saw them go, slim shadows hand in hand, and about in ghostly rout they trod a saraband, and damned grotesque made arabesque like the wind upon a sand. With the pirouettes of marionettes they tripped on pointed tread, but with flutes of fear they filled the ear as their grisly mask they led. And loud they sang, and long they sang, for they sang to wake the dead. Oh ho, they cried, the world is wide, but fettered limbs go lame, and once or twice to throw the dice in a gentlemanly game, but he does not win who plays with sin in the secret house of shame. No things of air these antics were that frolicked with such glee, to men whose lives were held in gyves, and whose feet might not go free. Ah, wounds of Christ, they were living things most terrible to see. Around, around, they waltzed and wound. Some wheeled in smirking pairs. With a mincing step of a demi-rep, some sidled up the stairs. And with subtle sneer and fawning leer, each helped us at our prayers. The morning wind began to moan, but still the night went on. Through its giant loom the web of gloom crept till each thread was spun. And as we prayed, we grew afraid of the justice of the sun. The moaning wind went wandering round the weeping prison wall, till like a wheel of turning steel we felt the minutes crawl. Oh, moaning wind, what had we done to have such a seneschal? At last I saw the shadowed bars, like a lattice wrought in lead, move right across the whitewashed wall that faced my three-plank bed, and I knew that somewhere in the world God's dreadful dawn was red. At 6 o'clock we cleaned our cells. At 7 all was still, but the sough and swing of a mighty wing the prison seemed to fill. For the Lord of Death with icy breath had entered in to kill. He did not pass in purple pomp, nor ride a moon-white steed. 3 yards of cord and a sliding board are all the gallows need. So with rope of shame the herald came to do the secret deed. We were as men who through a fen of filthy darkness grope. We did not dare to breathe a prayer or to give our anguish scope. Something was dead in each of us. And what was dead was hope. For man's grim justice goes its way and will not swerve aside. It slays the weak it slays the strong, it has a deadly stride. With iron heel it slays the strong, the monstrous parricide. We waited for the stroke of 8, each tongue was thick with thirst. For the stroke of 8 is the stroke of fate that makes a man accursed. And fate will use a running noose for the best man and the worst. We had no other thing to do save to wait for the sign to come. So like things of stone in a valley lone, quiet we sat and dumb, but each man's heart beat thick and quick like a madman on a drum. With sudden shock the prison clock smote on the shivering air, and from all the jail rose up a wail of impotent despair, like the sound the frightened marshes hear from some leper in his lair. And as one sees most fearful things in the crystal of a dream, we saw the greasy hempen rope hooked to the blackened beam, and heard the prayer the hangman's snare strangled into a scream. And all the woe that moved him so that he gave that bitter cry, and the wild regrets, and the bloody sweats, none knew so well as I. For he who lives more lives than one, more deaths than one, must die. End of part 3.